RT. Now, to discuss the situation surrounding Libya, I'm joined by Mark Almond, who's Oxford International Relations expert. Mr. Almond, thank you very much for being here with us in the program. So, will this Friends of Libya meeting taking place in Paris result in any major decisions over the country's future, in your opinion?
Well, I think we have to distinguish between two groups of friends. There's a broader group of countries, including, as you say, Russia, that hope to have relations with whatever the new regime is going to be. And then there's the narrower group who brought the new regime to power, the French, the British, the Americans, and so on, the core NATO countries, and the Arab Gulf states who have fought the war from the air, provided special forces on the ground and money. And so I think one of the issues we see at this meeting is really how far the new Libya is going to be open for business to all the countries that are interested in its oil and gas resources and trading with it, and how far there will be a privileged group who have, in a sense, created the new regime, because without the support of NATO, Colonel Gaddafi, I think, very clearly would have crushed his opposition back in March. And therefore, will the new regime survive without continued NATO support against those residual forces who still support Colonel Gaddafi or don't at least accept it?
Well, certainly that remains to be seen. Well, Russia has just recognized the National Transitional Council, but harshly criticized NATO's actions in Libya as breaching international law. So in light of growing criticism, how long do you think the alliance will stay in the country?
Well, you see, in a way, we have two levels to this. There's a kind of weasel language used. NATO technically is only providing air support. There are, however, troops, special forces, intelligence agents and so on from NATO countries like Britain, France and America on the ground, but they are technically not under the command of NATO. So we have a peculiar dance being played. At times, the NATO alliance is taking action, bombing targets which it claims could threaten civilians. At other times, special forces from the individual NATO countries not under NATO command take action to support the rebels' political and strategic goals to take control. I suspect, therefore, that we may see the NATO no-fly zone lifted fairly soon after Colonel Gaddafi is captured or killed and resistance ends, if it does. But I suspect we won't see the end of individual special forces, special advisors, intelligence and security operatives on the ground. In many ways, quite the contrary. If there is guerrilla resistance, if there is criminal violence, then I think the oil installations, the oil pipelines, will become a separate state within state to be protected for the international oil companies and the Western countries that import that oil. Rather, as in Saudi Arabia, you have a kingdom within a kingdom where the oil installations operate.
Well, while the Western leaders will be deciding today on the future of Libya post-Gaddafi, what can be said about the ordinary Libyans, and will their desires and wishes be taken into account?
I think this is the basic problem, isn't it? Colonel Gaddafi mightn't have been able to mobilize the Libyan population to fight in huge numbers on his side, but frankly, nor were the rebels able to do that. There's a huge silent majority that hasn't been showing great enthusiasm and may well feel that if and when elections are held, those elections will still be decided by those who have the gun. After all, we still see the streets of Tripoli and Benghazi resounding to gunfire, people with guns. And I think, therefore, the question of whether this new Libya will really be democratic is really very much in the air. And I'm afraid on past form, this kind of military intervention tends to produce a regime that holds elections, but the elections are already pre-scripted and the results are written in advance. And I doubt very much that the people who've gone to such great trouble to bring this NTC to power will want to see it turfed out of power, which might happen if there is a genuine election and ordinary Libyans say, well, we don't like either of the two extremes who plunged this country into war, chaos and bloodshed.
All right, Mr. Almond, thanks very much indeed for being here with us in the program. Mark Almond, Oxford International Relations expert.
Thank you.